Good afternoon, everybody. We are back here on United Stand. Adam Talks, 4 p.m. You know what that means. It means we're delving into our scrapbook of guests. Who do we know in the world of sports media? Who do we know that might give us some insight or give us some good news on what is actually happening with United right now? That job and that task is with Rob Dawson of ESPN. Sorry, Rob, because it's very quiet at the moment, I know, but we have got a lot to talk about. We're going to delve into Rasmus Holjund, the latest bid that's going. It's been reports that there's been an updated bid that is due soon. We'll talk about Mount, other transfer stuff, takeover stuff, Rob, and everything like that. But first of all, nearly time for the tour. Everything again, it just rolls around. Another summer for Manchester United, probably one of your busiest times of the year, no doubt.
It is. I mean, the summer's full of transfers and speculation, rumour. We hope. And then, yeah, I mean, for some lads, it's the season only finished last night with that England game, and then they're going to be on tour in less than 3 weeks, so it just doesn't stop.
It never stops. It never stops for the players, like you said there. Some players only just getting on holiday right now. It seems like the season finished ages ago, to be honest. I think, as a United fan, we put it to the back of our minds because of the way it did finish, obviously with our noisy neighbours. You cover them a lot as well, Rob, being a Manchester correspondent and everything like that. But United fans finish the season the way it's finished. You just then automatically go into how can we improve mode and what can we do to bridge that gap between us and Manchester City. And we're literally grasping at thin air. We're clutching at straws right now in terms of transfer news, Rob. Is it a case of, I mean, we'll touch on Holjund because your latest article was talking about United strikers and that being number one target. Latest bid apparently is going to be around about 60 million. Is there anything extra or any news that you could tell us on anything striker-wise for United, including Holjund?
Yeah, I mean, first you just mentioned there about bridging the gap to City. The way this season ended with not only that FA Cup final, but obviously City going and winning the treble, it puts the pressure straight on United, doesn't it, to go and do something so they can show the fans that they are trying to bridge the gap, because there is still quite a gap. When you've got that, and then you've got other teams, other clubs in the Premier League who apparently are doing quite a lot of business, the likes of Liverpool have already brought in someone, Arsenal are making bids and looking to bring in some quality players. It does put the pressure on Man United, particularly, you just mentioned there about the strikers. I think it's fairly common knowledge that United are desperate for a centre forward. The top priority in this transfer window is a striker, and at the moment they are struggling to get that done. I mean, it's not a quick process. I mean, Man United fans will know how difficult these transfers are. United are hampered a little bit with their budget. You know, there's not an unlimited budget there to go out and spend £200 million on one player. They're going to have to be quite careful with the way that they spend it. It's about agreeing a fee with a club for a player who wants to come. I think the difference this summer perhaps than last summer is that there are more players, higher quality players who are willing to come to Old Trafford. But that's only half the battle. The main battle really is agreeing a fee for a player with a club. And you know, the club have said, and I don't want to sit here and defend the club too much in terms of transfer policy, but you know, the club have said for a long time that when United come calling, the price goes up, and that in a lot of aspects is true. It's about finding the right deal for the club and putting an offer on the table that another club's going to accept. And at the moment, that is becoming quite tough.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to bring up a point that you said just off camera. Then we were talking about the tour and usually the clamour for the world's media to get to Manchester United pre-season games. Obviously, there's the game in Oslo, and there's not really much to really go for. It's like no press access, and you would usually go if something big was happening. You'd expect it to be happening. You'd expect to be a lot of talk, maybe a debut or something like that. But the fact that no one's really looking at that game as important kind of tells you how slow United have got off the mark this summer, and feeds into the phase of every United fan right now.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's very easy to point the finger at the club and say, you know, you're not doing enough. I mean, rest assured, the club are doing a lot behind the scenes. The problem is that, you know, the fans aren't going to accept it until there's a player stood on the pitch with a scarf, having signed, sealed and delivered, that kind of thing. Until that happens, there's going to be an awful lot of pressure on the club. There's going to be an awful lot of pressure from the supporters who want a signing, because they want hope that the gap to Manchester City is going to be bridged next season. And you're right, you know, the pre-season games are usually all about, are you going to give a debut to your summer signing? At the moment, they've obviously not brought anyone in. I imagine that they are hopeful that by the time those fixtures come around, there will be someone in. Erik ten Hag has been clear, I think, behind the scenes that he wants his players in early. You know, there's an obvious benefit to getting players in for pre-season training. You know, you don't want a situation particularly where you're kind of not scrabbling around, but you're looking to sign players at the end of the window. I mean, it was, you know, great that, you know, United eventually signed Casemiro, but obviously it would have been better if he'd been in before that Brighton game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So there's lots of things at play here. You know, United need to get the right players in. They need to cut their cloth accordingly in terms of the budget and what fees they're kind of paying out, but also they need to kind of respect Erik ten Hag's demands and make sure that these players are coming in as early as you would like. And at the moment, you can understand why the manager is probably looking at things and thinking, well, this is quite frustrating for a number of different reasons.
Super chat in from Slow Sports News says, I wouldn't say we've been slow off the mark at all, as we have made a bid even though it was too low. Slow off the mark in terms of positions, or critical positions. Obviously, if Harry Kane's gone. If Osimhen looks like he's too dear. If I was to say to you now, would it look like the most realistic striker option for United right now for us to go for, price-wise, like you said with the budget, Rob? Would it be the Rasmus Holjund sort of signing? Is that our sort of budget now for a striker?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the obvious one is Harry Kane. Again, I don't think it's any secret that United and Erik ten Hag would love to have Harry Kane.
He's made him his number one choice, didn't he?
Right, and that's obvious, and it's obvious why he would do that. The problem is that from the very beginning of this, United privately said, well, this is going to be really hard to do. A, because you don't particularly like dealing with Daniel Levy. You know, he's got a reputation as being a very tough negotiator. He likes to drag things out right to the wire to get the most amount of money out of the buying club. And United didn't really want to get involved in that. If Tottenham were willing to deal right now, then that's obviously something that they would look at. But what they don't want to do is get involved in some kind of prolonged transfer saga where you're not sure on the last day of the window whether you're going to get your man or not. So if you take Harry Kane off the table, which, you know, I don't think United particularly think that that's a doable deal, then you are looking at players like Rasmus Holjund, who with the best will in the world is very young. He's not scored an awful lot of goals in Italy. He's you know, very raw. You're kind of hedging your bets a little bit and saying, well, we're going to buy the striker that we think you're going to become, not the striker that you are right now. The problem is that I think Erik ten Hag would love to have a proven number 9. Again, there are difficulties, even if you look beyond Kane. You know, Victor Osimhen is, again, an unobvious choice because of what he's done in Italy with Napoli. But again, Napoli are going to want top money for him, and there's question marks over whether United can afford that. You know, if you're looking at a fee of, I don't know, 120 million euros plus, then I'm not sure that United can afford that without selling a lot of first-team squad members.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, you've got to go. You said it at the start. The fear is that other clubs around us, mainly our competitors, are actually going out making serious bids. I mean, West Ham turned down 90 million today for Declan Rice. I mean, we're sort of like thinking, how are Arsenal ahead of us in terms of the pecking order for these big players? And that, I think, is how everyone looks at this budget and just goes, well, there's the proof. The proof is in the pudding. The fact that we're not even at the table for the likes of Rice. I mean, I was talking about this on a show the other day, and that is just how far United have fallen. Until the takeover is sorted, I think this is Glazonomics until then, and balancing the books is going to be very difficult. I'm just going to move your mic. Sorry there, mate. I think it is just getting feedback. That'll do.
Yeah.
Cheers.
I mean, I think the one that Man United fans might look at is Liverpool. You know, you get Alexis McAllister through the door before the end of June. You know, I'm not suggesting that United were ever really, you know, desperate to sign him, but they're looking at Liverpool, who have got a lot of ground to make up themselves, and they've made a really big signing for what seems like a reasonable price, really early. So when you've got a situation like that, it does become very frustrating. I mean, you're right about the budget and what's happening with the ownership of the club. I mean, I don't think the ownership of the club has got a massive bearing on what budget is available this summer anyway, because of the FFP concerns. Obviously, if, I don't know, say for example, Qatar came in, you clear the debt, you know, there would be a little bit more wiggle room in terms of transfer budget then, but you're not talking about Qataris coming in and putting $1 billion down on the table and saying, right, go and build the world's best squad. That just can't happen. I mean, I think the most important thing this summer from a budget standpoint is sales. You know, United just don't sell well, and they haven't for the best part of 10 years. I mean, I saw a stat, I think yesterday, that the only player they made a profit on in the last sort of 9-10 years is Dan James. When you compare that with the likes of City, who take for example Leroy Sané, who had a year left on his contract, had no intention of signing another contract, and City still got 50 million for him when he went to Bayern. United just don't do that. So when you've got a load of first-team players that perhaps you're willing to look at offers for, the likes of Harry Maguire, Scott McTominay, Dean Henderson, if you can sell those players well, then you can add another sort of 50, 60 million to your budget, and that's another top quality player that you're able to bring in. So, the budget is tight because of FFP. If they can sell well and get decent money for a few of those squad players, then it becomes to look like a little bit of a different picture. But again, not only have we not seen anyone come in, we've not seen anyone unsold, which is part of the problem at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, on the outgoings, is there anything in the fact that 3 names you mentioned there, 2 of them are academy players, 100% profit obviously helps with financial fair play. McTominay, obviously Dean Henderson, big debate around the goalkeeper situation. We'll probably touch on that in a little bit. But in terms of Dean Henderson and the Forest deal, we heard it broke down. We heard their priority is to make this happen, Nottingham Forest. Is there any sort of news on the Dean Henderson situation?
Yeah, I mean, the last news that we had on that was that Forest were keen to buy him, that was kind of agreed.
Was that agreed in the first time round?
Well, it wasn't, because United insisted on a straight loan for that. So Forest did want to put sort of a permanent buy clause in that, and United turned it down, presumably because they wanted to leave that option open in case they needed to do something around their goalkeepers. So any talks would have to start again about a permanent deal, but Forest apparently wanted to do that the minute that they stayed in the Premier League. Steve Cooper quite likes him. He was told that they were willing to let him go to Forest, but they couldn't really make a decision until David signed his new contract. Now, at the time, I think United, John Murtaugh and everyone else connected at United expected De Gea to sign his new contract because it was so close. Obviously, that has changed a little bit now, in that United are starting to become a little bit worried that that's not going to happen and that he might leave on a free transfer. So if you remove him from the equation, if De Gea leaves, then suddenly you do need to find another number 1 goalkeeper. If you're banking on keeping De Gea, then maybe you can bring in a sort of maybe a shorter term option, someone who's a little bit older, perhaps someone who's happy to kind of compete for the number 1 spot and let them fight it out. But if David De Gea goes, you need a number 1. And where are you going to find that 50 million euros from? I'm not sure. So the whole thing, when you talk about transfers at Man United, it does feel a little bit up in the air. Again, that's not necessarily to do with the ownership. It's to do with just having things in place, and maybe if David De Gea does sign his new contract, then you can suddenly let Dean Henderson move to Forest. You bring in, I don't think they're going to pay 30 million. I think it's more likely that they deal around sort of 20 million.
Yeah.
But then you bring 20 million in, but that's 20 million that goes back into the budget, or the best part of 20 million. And suddenly the things look a little bit easier. So then you can go to Atalanta and maybe pay a little bit more for Holjund, or maybe Kane comes back on the table, or maybe you can go and tempt Napoli with a deal for Osimhen. So there are all these things that need to happen. It's just very, very complicated. It's easy for me to sit here. I know that the fans who are watching aren't going to kind of listen to that and think, well, that's great. I think that, obviously they want things to happen. You want players on the pitch at Old Trafford with the shirt, don't you? That's
exactly, yeah. I touched on what you said there in terms of making it happen, how we do it. A couple of the members have come in kiboshing the financial fair play. Financial fair play has nothing to do with it. Chelsea getting the pass. How come Chelsea are still getting their players financial fair play again? That's a question, isn't it? I mean, why aren't United savvy to these sort of loophole deals that Todd Bowley's managed to somehow make happen? Are we just too scared to push the boundaries with UEFA, with financial fair play? Because we've never really been in any situation like a Chelsea, like City have, with all the charges and everything over their heads. It's like we've never seemed to have been there. We just seem to struggle. And it's like everyone else seems to get away with it. And United have this, a rule book as to just don't go near that sort of that deal. 6 year, I'm hearing, and Kunku's deal is another 6-year deal today that Pochettino's just signed. Are we just steering clear of that sort of deal and that tactic?
I mean, I think, in terms of Chelsea, people will know that Todd Bowley's come in with that policy to offer big long contracts, which takes the hit a little bit off FFP because it's spread. Transfer fees are spread over the length of the contract. It's what he's done with incoming players is something that we've not really seen in football before, English football, where usually we're used to seeing players sort of sign 4 and 5 year deals, and he's signing players to sort of 7-8 year deals. So it's certainly a new tactic. I mean, United have been quite strong supporters of FFP, obviously, because they generate the most money. So in theory, they should benefit from FFP more than other clubs. Again, the problem is that they've not sold well.
Chelsea do.
Well, Chelsea do sell well. Chelsea, they've got a huge academy. They've got players at different clubs on loan all over the world, and they do sell. They sell players who are on the fringes of the first team well. City have done it really well. Obviously, City have got their own financial issues, and I don't have to remind United fans about the Premier League charges and all that kind of stuff.
Not at all.
But United just haven't sold well. You look at players who have gone, the likes of Alexis Sanchez, Romelu Lukaku, even the likes of Eric Bailly and Alex Tellez, who last summer should have been sold. In the end, they're loaned out. Fair enough that the clubs who have taken them on have paid all of the wages or bits of the wages, but they're going to be back here in the summer. Anthony Martial, we're led to believe that United are open to offers for Anthony Martial, but who's going to pay the money for him? Last time he left, he went to Sevilla on loan. I just think United are paying the price for not selling well over the last decade, and that needs to change because, as I say, it would affect the budget this summer, but it would affect FFP restrictions moving forward because it's all very well sort of getting through this summer. I don't think any United fan who's watching this thinks that United are going to catch City over the space of one summer. We could be talking about exactly the same thing in 12 months' time, which, rightly, United fans would listen to that and go, well, that's going to be incredibly frustrating because they want to catch City right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, in terms of Martial, obviously divides opinion. I think it's more in the outgoing section now of a majority of United fan base. I think they've had enough, but it's like a comment says there, actually, the only way out for Martial is through the Saudi League. It's just like the get out of jail card. It's like the new Chinese league, isn't it? It's like, because like you said, 250 grand a week wages. I don't think he's still got 2 years left to run on his deal. It's like, I just don't know where Martial would go. No one is going to invest that amount of money in a player that hasn't finished 90 minutes in over 3 years. I mean, he's not scored in consecutive Premier League games for United in the same amount of time.
I just think that there's been a lot of poor decisions made. Again, we'll have to remind United fans, and I'm not just talking about selling players. I'm talking about contracts. I mean, Phil Jones, for example. How has it got to a point where Phil Jones has barely played for 2 years but still had a contract? Why was he offered a contract when he was? Chris Smalling was another one. Marcos Rojo was given a big long contract and then barely played. You don't see other clubs doing that kind of thing. Other clubs seem to be very, very ruthless with the way that they deal with players, and I think that's what United need to, the example that United need to follow. I mean, just look at the goalkeeping situation. Pep Guardiola came in at City, and the minute that he came in, axed Joe Hart. At the time, Joe Hart was considered to be one of the best goalkeepers in the world.
England number one. Yeah.
Last summer you've got a situation where Erik ten Hag wasn't particularly sure about David De Gea because of his ability with the ball at his feet, but couldn't really do anything about it. He couldn't say, right, David, you're gone, because there wasn't money there to replace him. They've had to stick with him for a season, and even now, I think there's lots of United fans will say it's time to move on from David De Gea. Thanks for your service, you've been great, but the game's moved on. We need someone else, and I think that's probably right. But Erik ten Hag's in a situation where you need to have a goalkeeper next year. Can you just let David De Gea walk off and say, well, we're going to take the risk? Maybe we have a season with Tom Heaton. It's very, very tough. I just don't think the United have been ruthless enough over the last sort of decade, and it's coming back to bite them. And it feels again like we're starting another summer where they're doing it with the hands tied behind the back a little bit.
That's it there. A super chat coming from John. He says, are the Glazers / the club delaying signings so they don't have to pay the wages? Waiting a month will save them X amount, etc. It's another question regarding the ownership. I mean, I will touch on that now, Rob. I think that takes us into it nicely. I think the big question is, why the hell is it so quiet? It's just it's just died. Like last week, it was crazy. Everything that was going on with Company House coming out about the registration for the Qatari ownership and everything like that, the 9-2 Foundation, and then bang, it just flatlined completely. In terms of, I mean, it is a big takeover, but in terms of your experience, is this normal right now to be so close to a pre-season and what we're talking about transfer-wise and the club being in the best position going forward? Is this strange right now, being so quiet?
I'm surprised. We were told probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the end of the season that a decision would be delayed until the end of the season.
I remember reading that, yeah.
So, because they didn't want to cause any kind of distraction, they had a FA Cup final, they need to qualify the Champions League, which is fair enough. The flip side of that is that also the Glazers probably didn't want any kind of protest. If this goes the way that the fans are dreading and they stick around, that they didn't want an opportunity for a game to be called off, or the protests that we've seen, doubled probably if that was to happen. I thought that it would be concluded, or there would be a decision made fairly sharpish after the end of the season. The thing that I can't get my head around really is that, after 18 years, you'd think that the Glazer family would have some kind of affection for United beyond the dividends. They've been to enough games, they've been at the club for a long enough period that they would have developed some kind of affinity to the club to think that, at some stage you're going to have to do the right thing. I know that might sound very naive, but you think that they would have some kind of affinity for the club somewhere. And this dragging on just shows that they haven't at all. That, again, I said there that it probably doesn't affect the transfer budget massively, but it is a lot of uncertainty. It's uncertainty for the manager, it's uncertainty for the players, it's uncertainty for the fans, some of whom are buying season tickets. You'd think that the Glazers at some stage would want to do the right thing. I'm not saying walk away for free, take your money and then go. But the fact that they've let this drag on, and it is them dragging on. Now, everyone will know that all these offers are on the table. There's not only 2 offers to take over, there are offers of minority investment from at least 4 or 5 US financial groups. So the offers are all there. It's dragged on so long that they're probably not going to eke any more out of these bidders, because they've made them jump through hoops and take meetings and put new bids and all that kind of stuff. This process is finished now. They need to make a decision about what they want to do. I think the uncertainty just is. I just think it's really unfair on fans. I think on the club. Again in March we were told that staff had been told that they could expect clarity on the situation by the end of the season. Well, we're beyond that and a little bit more. We're kind of weeks after the end of the season and still no one really is any the wiser. Again, fans will probably say that I'm very naive in thinking that the Glazers at some stage should do the right thing, but I think the fact that they're letting this drag on and causing this uncertainty in such a pivotal summer really for Erik ten Hag and the club, I think just shows exactly what they think of the club. I think it's really sad, to be honest. I genuinely thought that by the end of the season that they would be in a position to make a decision and give people some clarity. I just think that it's pretty shameful really on their part that they're letting this drag on.
Yeah, super chat in here from Darren Mulaney says, if Qatar get the club, will it be easier to sell players? We'll probably come to that in a minute, but I just wanted to touch on what you said there in terms of the staff and their clarity. Is this like now the time where you start putting 2 and 2 together? It's like you start hearing leaks about the budget coming out. Staff members are like, well, I don't know my security. The club clearly don't think of me. It starts from the top, like you said. There's no affinity with the Glazers to the club. It feeds its way down. No one knows where they're standing right now. There could be a complete restructure with the Qataris coming. Never mind selling players. It could be the staff within. Is that sort of like, could you look at that and go, there is a big problem inside right now, and that's where we might hear some stories leaked and stuff like that? There's got to be a little bit of panic.
I just think it affects everything. It does affect the day-to-day staff, the people who are working there day-to-day.
Especially with no day-to-day action going on now as well.
And the one example of that is the manager. Again, like I don't think the takeover is necessarily going to affect the budget particularly. Give or take, 10 or 20 million here or there. But he has a right to know what's going on. He has the right to know who's going to own the club that he's working for, because ultimately, we're both going to go on tour. The first person that we're going to speak to in the summer is the manager. He's going to have to sit in front of everyone and answer these questions about the takeover, about the ownership, about why we haven't signed players, or why players haven't been sold. All these kind of things. Well, it's not fair to have him sit in front of the media and answer all these questions when he's been kept in the dark. I actually think United have been very, very lucky with Ten Hag, because he has tried to be quite diplomatic. He has been asked these questions at the end of the season, and he's kind of tried to fend them off a little bit, do the right thing for the club. And if that was a Jose Mourinho style manager, I'm not sure that he would have answered in the same way. I think he would have every right to say, well, yeah, like, it's frustrating. I don't like it. I want to know. And I'm certain that those conversations are happening behind the scenes. The question is whether, United get to the summer, perhaps signings haven't been made and perhaps there isn't clarity on the ownership, whether Erik ten Hag is going to sit there in the summer and still try and straight back these questions. Because ultimately, it's his reputation that's on the line. You know, if he fails at this job, for whatever reason, for a lack of support or whatever, he's going to struggle to get another job. You know, he's hedged his reputation on being a success on Man United, so he deserves to know what he's working with. My big fear with all of this is that it's starting to look very similar to 2018, and look, it's very, very early. Like, we could be talking in a month's time with a striker in and Mason Mount and all that kind of stuff, and things will have changed, obviously. But in 2018, United finished second under Jose. They got to the FA Cup final. Everyone was expecting this big leap forward to try and catch City. Jose got to LA at UCLA, did his first press conference and started setting fire to everything because he just wasn't happy with what was happening. He wanted players in, it wasn't happening. The negotiations with the board broke down. By the end of the summer, he was barely speaking to Ed Woodward because he wanted a centre half. United wouldn't give him a centre back. You know, by December, the results were awful and Jose was gone. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen with Erik ten Hag, but when that kind of mood descends on a football club and you start with that momentum, it's very, very difficult to break it. And it would be so disappointing for United if, after a good season where you've made progress, to wreck it all and have a summer where you stand still and then suddenly you start next season and you've been overtaken by Liverpool because they've made some signings. Arsenal have signed Rice and Jurrien Timber or someone, and another centre forward. Chelsea have made a load of signings, have got a new manager. Spurs have got a new manager and made a load of signings, and suddenly you look at it and you think, well, United might not get in the Champions League now because they're going to struggle to compete with all these teams. Not only are you missing that chance to catch City, because you've stood still, you've fallen behind all the teams that are trying to catch you. You know, hopefully, United, by the time they get to pre-season training, by the time they get to the games in Oslo, Scotland and New York, that things have changed drastically. But I can understand why United fans at the moment are feeling really, really apprehensive about it all.
I mean, it's like that you said there, because it's not just Ten Hag, it's the people who look after Ten Hag, and they're trying to balance the media, the people who sort of look after us. They can't stop people asking these questions. They can't protect Ten Hag once he sits in that chair, and then the pressure starts to mount, starts to affect everything and how it works. It sets a bad tone. And I think that's like what you're saying there with like Jose. He's like the type of manager who just said, no, I'm just going to go all out here, like the Conte style. But Ten Hag talks in code a little bit. Even his message at the end of the season when he said, the club know that we have to invest. If you want to compete and stay in the top four, you have to invest. People invested in January around us and we didn't. He is saying these things. He's doing it, like you said, a bit delicately, his first season in. But it's only so far you can push someone before he starts going, well,
yeah,
what do you want me to do?
Of course. And, you know, I think Erik ten Hag, character-wise, is a lot closer to Jose Mourinho, perhaps, than people give him credit for. I don't think he's one to sit in front of the media and set fire to everything like Jose did. But I think behind the scenes he's very, very demanding, and he has every right to be demanding. You know, we said a couple of times in press conferences that, you know, kind of cheekily, like a manager always wants more, and that's fine. You know, it's a manager's prerogative to always be demanding of a board to say, oh, look, I could do with another player here, or I could do with, you know, more budget for this player. You know, that's the manager's. Well, see, it's a prerogative to be demanding of the club and the board,
especially at United.
Well, yeah, of course. And the problem is that the worst thing for a football club, I think, is uncertainty. And again, I'm not suggesting that, you know, a new owner will come in and splash loads of cash in the summer, but the ownership situation is uncertain. The summer transfer plans are uncertain because no one's come in yet, no one's left yet, and the longer that uncertainty drags on, the more it kind of feeds to everyone. It feeds through the manager, it feeds through the coaches, to the players, and that's exactly what happened in 2018 in that summer, where it just kind of dripped through the entire club. And a summer that should have been really exciting for the club, exciting for the fans, turned into a nightmare. And again, you know, what is it? Sort of middle of June. It's far too early probably to be talking like that. But the signs are there. They need to bring players in because that's the way that you're going to catch City. And there needs to be a decision made about how the ownership of the club is going to look moving forward. I just think the longer it drags on, the worse it's going to get. And then you get a situation where if Erik ten Hag is massively frustrated as a figurehead of the club, then that is a massive, massive problem. You know, finally you've landed on a manager who has taken a step or a lot of steps in the right direction. You cannot lose this manager. You cannot be in a situation where at the end of the summer he's falling out with the board saying you haven't given me what I wanted, and he's looking at his own future. That cannot happen. I'm not saying that you need to give him everything that he wants, because no manager's going to get everything he wants, but you need to keep him happy. You need to give him the tools to help him catch City. And at the moment, that's not really happening.
That leads into another question there from Tony over in the States, who says, is it possible Erik ten Hag leaves in the summer if he's not backed? You answered it there. It's like, where do Manchester United go? I can hear it in your tone, the way you say it there, and like where the club is right now, it's like on a knife edge. To lose such a key figure who's been the one positive spark over the last few years because we cannot back him and give him what he wants to move forward, I don't know where we go from there, mate. Honestly, that would be my worst fear as a fan, ultimately.
I mean, look, this has turned obviously very, very negative very, very quickly, and the hope is that, maybe
could make 2 signings next week. Could be all good,
maybe we all turn up in Scotland and in Oslo and New York, and they've got Mason Mount, and they've got a centre forward, they've got a bit of budget left, and they're looking to maybe make the 1 or 2 additions, and the mood lifts. Maybe that is the case, and I'm sure that's what United are hoping for. Mason Mount in particular, I don't think there are that many obstacles to getting that done. Yeah. I would expect that to get done. But right now, he's not a Man United player, so I think it's fair enough to start questioning the direction of the club and what's happening this summer. And even the fact that you've had a question there from a fan, could Erik ten Hag walk? Shows that the mood is a little bit on a knife edge. And it was easy. The last sort of the final weeks of the season, someone at ESPN had asked me to do a piece on the mood around Man United, and it did. And even then, it felt like on a knife edge. You qualify for the Champions League, you win the FA Cup final, you make a load of signings, you get new owners in. Optimism around here is going to go through the roof. The flip side of that, though, is that obviously they've already qualified for the Champions League and they lost the FA Cup final, but you don't make the signings and the ownership drags on or the Glazers stay, then the optimism is going to go through the floor and the mood around the club darkens. And so it does. I'm not suggesting that everything around the club is negative. That's far from the case. But it does feel like it's on a knife edge, and United fans in particular, I think, need some kind of positivity, whether that's Mason Mount or a striker coming in. I just think that would help the mood around the club and make everyone feel like at least they're taking the steps that are needed to catch City. Yeah,
you said middle of June, coming to the back end of June. Obviously, contracts end around the 1st of July, and that's when you start seeing a lot of moving. Free transfer-wise, obviously we bought in a Jeremy Eriksson last season. There's reports about Rabiot as well. Could we see more in terms of that sort of deal? United pushing that as another good midfielder, maybe an improvement on what we've got when that contract is finally up at Juve on the 1st of July. Would you say that's when that sort of deal would happen? Like a free transfer?
No, there's no real reason why the Rabiot thing couldn't have been done already.
Does that make you feel like we're not going for him?
That's United are interested in him and certainly were interested in him last summer. He's a good option. If you're already interested in a player and now he's on a free transfer, then clearly he's a good option in terms of
does that make you feel like he's waiting to see if he does get, say, an A target, like his first choice target, rather than going on Rabiot, because it's obviously room in the squad then, isn't it, as well?
But again, though, you're looking at the squad there and you're thinking, well, the second half of last season, Eriksson came back and also you had Sabitzer. Now, so you're talking about Mason Mount, and Mason Mount would probably offer competition for Christian Eriksen, who did really, really well. I think United fans would probably agree that towards the end of games, tired a little bit, and he looked quite leggy. A player like Mason Mount would fit, in my opinion, would fit into that system quite well. But you could probably argue that you need a Mason Mount and a Rabiot to kind of bolster that, especially if Sabitzer's going to go back to Bayern. Is Mason Mount on his own enough?
No.
There's a case to sign Rabiot as well. I think United may be a little bit put off by what happened with negotiations last summer. Again, everyone will know that his mother in particular was quite tough in his negotiations.
Told to the cleaners.
So he's in a particularly strong position now because there's no fee that would be owed to Juventus. Again, a couple of weeks ago that was still on the table, but it's another one that's gone quite quiet. It is one that could be done very, very quickly. That's the benefit of a free transfer, in that you don't have to go and negotiate a fee with another club. It could get done very, very quickly. But as I say, there are other clubs interested. PSG, for one of them, have been linked. United. The problem is again that United, it doesn't at the moment. There doesn't seem like a massively clear plan. I think if that probably changes if they get Mason Mount over the line. And as I say, I would expect that to be done hopefully by the time that pre-season training starts, because again, there's no real obstacles in the way of that. You've got to go and negotiate a fee with Chelsea. I think Chelsea wants 70 million. United offered 40, which got turned down. I think the expectation is that both clubs will kind of compromise around 50, 55 million. Chelsea need that money in early because they need it to count for their accounts before the end of June. So if United pay a bulk of that up front, that's going to be quite a good thing for Chelsea. Mason Mount, we're led to believe, is quite keen to come. He fits into Erik ten Hag's system. The market for Mount has cooled quite a lot because Liverpool have signed McAllister. Arsenal have gone in a different direction. There was talk of Bayern at one stage, but that's gone cold. So there isn't really much standing in the way of Mason Mount. I think really that could get done quite quickly. Then it's just about agreeing a fee with Chelsea.
On midfielder in, midfielders have to go out. The McFred combo, which one is more likely? Obviously, Fred's contract is running down. Scott McTominay carries value, like we said, financial fair play, and the bonus of that. Out of the two, and the way they performed this season, if United were to offload a midfielder, who would you say is more favourable?
I mean, there are pros and cons for both of them. Obviously, Newcastle are interested.
We just need to put a Scotland shirt under his United shirt for McTominay. I think that's what we need to do.
Newcastle are interested in Scott McTominay and have been for the best part of a year, and obviously he would command a larger fee. Yeah. If Newcastle were to, I don't think Newcastle are going to pay anything like 30 million for him, but he would command a larger fee. I think, reading between the lines, Ten Hag kind of made a decision with Fred probably about 10 months ago because they triggered his one-year option, which takes him to 2024, but decided that they weren't going to start longer-term contract negotiations like they did with Luke Shaw, Marcus Rashford and Diogo Dalot, and that kind of tells you where he was in the pecking order for Erik ten Hag. He is entering the last year of his deal, so the fee that you would get is lower. There's been a little bit of interest from around the Premier League and also from clubs in Europe. I mean, again, you talk about being ruthless. I think lots of United fans will look at that and go, well, sell them both. Sell them both and bring in 2 or 3 other players. I'm not sure that's going to happen. If it was a choice between which one I was going to sell, I would probably pick Fred. I think McTominay offers a little bit more. He's a little bit more versatile. I think Fred has had an awful lot of opportunities at Man United and hasn't really been the player, bar the odd 1 or 2 games, hasn't really been the player that perhaps we expected to see. Again, though, there are pros to selling Scott McTominay because he would command a larger fee. A bulk of that would go then back into the budget. You mentioned before about FFP. He's an academy player, so it looks good in terms of FFP because it's pure profit. So there are pros and cons to both. Again, I think one of them probably needs to go. Can't be in a situation, I don't think, where you start next season with both of them in your midfield and no midfielders in. Yeah,
I mean, tongues get wagging when the likes of Marco Silva from Fulham, the manager, starts talking to Fred at the end of the last game of the season, stuff like that. I mean, you said clubs would be interested within the Premier League. I'd see that probably Mark Fulham be a good fit for Fred as well. Darren Mulaney with a super chat says, I would like to see Moani as well as Holjund this summer. I mean, the names, the potentials, like you've said this already at the start of the show in terms of the United buying potential. I just don't think there is a striker out there. There is, however, Rob, a striker already at Manchester United who is on the retain list. It's a sore subject, I know, but obviously Mason Greenwood is an asset to the football club. Still got, I think, 2 years plus on his contract. Could you see him walling him that United shirt? What's the where would you go right now in terms of how you see it? What do you think would happen with Greenwood come the start of the season?
I mean, I don't know, to be honest. Again,
another issue for United to deal with, again, with everything else going on.
Well, again, I mean, you talk about, we just spent however long talking then about uncertainty around the football club, and it's something else that's uncertain. Yeah. I'm sure Erik ten Hag wants to know whether Mason Greenwood is going to be part of his squad or not.
Is there any truth in Ten Hag saying he would like him?
Well, I think he gave an interview, didn't he, with the Times, where he talked up his attributes. Look, no one can doubt Mason Greenwood's ability as a footballer, but this obviously goes beyond that. You have to do what's right for the football club, for everyone connected to the football club. United have taken their time to launch their own investigation, which is the right thing to do after the criminal charges were dropped. Again, though, we're into a spell now. What is it? Like, you got 5 weeks between sort of the end of the season and the start of the pre-season tour, where that decision has to be made one way or the other, because Erik ten Hag needs to know whether he's in the squad or not. I think that's fair enough. I think Ten Hag has been quite clear in saying that it's not going to be a decision that's made by him, and I think that's right. I think it needs to be made above him in the best interests of the football club on the whole, not just what's in the best interests of the club on the pitch. But again, Erik Ten Hag would have every right to say, well, have I got him for pre-season? You know, is he part of my squad for next year, or is he not? I mean, I think the club privately were quite clear about the retain list in that he's been retained because he's still under contract at Man United, and the list that they've got to provide to the Premier League is simply a list of players who are under contract. And Mason Greenwood, as things stand, is under contract. I don't think it's an indication particularly about what they're going to end up doing with him and what decision they're going to be made. I think the only thing I would say, as just said before, that Erik Ten Hag needs to know one way or the other, because again, it's more uncertainty that Erik doesn't need and the football club doesn't need.
That's it. I mean, there's many reports about United's list of players that we're looking at. A whole spine, centre mid, centre back, centre forward. We know possibly a new right back. I remember Xhaka has done well, but all of this has been thrown up in the air a little bit by the goalkeeping situation again. I'm just going to come straight out and ask for it now. He's got literally 10 days. Otherwise, he's a free agent. David De Gea. He's not signing that deal. Is that a sign of him just saying, look, he would have signed it already, surely, wouldn't he? He wants out.
I mean, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the 10-day thing because, in theory,
it's still there. The offer's on the table.
Yeah, look, June. Well, it's not. I mean, because the retain list would show whether there was an offer there on the table,
true,
and it didn't. United have said that negotiations are ongoing. I think there's a difference between actually having an offer on the table that's waiting there to be signed and negotiations carrying on about a contract. I mean, yeah, look, June 30th, his current deal expires. All that means is that on the 1st of July, he's not getting paid by Man United. I don't think that rules out the fact that he could possibly stay. I think we saw in the past with Juan Mata that his contract expired. There was a couple of weeks, and then he ended up signing a new one. So it is possible that could happen. You're right. I think it just adds more uncertainty. I think it's difficult with De Gea because, again, everyone will know that his last contract was a massive contract on about 375 grand a week. United said very, very early on, we're not going to pay you that anymore. And that's one of the reasons why his one-year option wasn't triggered, because you would trigger it on the 375 grand a week and you'd be bound to pay him that for another year. United could have exercised the option at any point during the second half of the season and chose not to. And that option, I think, expired at the end of May anyway, so that's off the table now. United have been quite clear that they want to agree a longer deal on lower basic wages, but with a built-in bonus system that, say for example that he was number one and he played all the games next season, that he would probably get up towards that sort of 300 grand a week through bonuses. Again, though, De Gea is well within his rights to say, well, that's quite a big pay cut. Why do I want what should be the peak of his career? Why should we be taking a massive pay cut? I've got a lot of sympathy for United because there isn't that much of a market for David De Gea, even at 200 grand a week. Who's taking David De Gea at 200 grand a week? No one in the Premier League, none of the top clubs, because they've all got goalkeepers. In Spain, probably not. Elsewhere in Europe, can't really see it. The only teams really that could pay that wage are teams in Saudi Arabia, and clearly if you go there, you're taking a step down in quality. I think ideally United would like to agree the deal of the framework that they had already mapped out, that kind of 200 grand a week plus the bonuses. I think the fact that it's dragging on is becoming quite a worry for Man United, because you're right, it changes the dynamic of the rest of the window. You sign David for another 2 years, for example, and then you've got a goalkeeper that you can use as your first choice next season. If he goes, you need to spend money to buy a new goalkeeper. You need to spend, whether it's Jordan Pickford or whether it's another goalkeeper, you need to spend to bring in another first choice goalkeeper. And at the moment, the budget is already quite tight. The way that Man United were talking last week behind the scenes was that the optimism that he would sign a new deal that was there maybe a month ago has kind of disintegrated a little bit, and they aren't as confident as they were. They still want him to stay. They still hope that he's going to stay, but it's more hope now than it is expecting him to, and that at the moment is quite a big problem.
Yeah. Why does United get overcharged for players? I don't see clubs like Liverpool overpaying. Does our recruitment have a bad reputation in the industry? That's a question a lot of United fans have been asking for years and years.
Yes, is a short answer to that. Yeah, they do.
It is.
They don't sell well, and they've got a reputation of overpaying for players.
So everyone takes them to the cleaners.
Well, yeah, and so you've got directors of football all over Europe who see Man United come up on the mobile phone and start licking their lips. and it takes a long time to get over that reputation. Again, I mean, the one I would point to is Liverpool signing Alexis McAllister. Liverpool just got that deal for a really high-quality young midfielder. They've got it done and over the line very, very quickly. And I'm not suggesting that Liverpool beat United to it or whatever, but they've got a player in, really before the season's even finished. It's done and dusted, and the player's there, and he's going to be starting the season for them. He's going to be on their pre-season tour. City did it with Holjund, a deal which, in theory, last summer could have dragged out for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they announced it, I think, before the end of April. Yeah. When was the last time that United did that? It's very, very frustrating for Man United fans. Hopefully, I'll see you on tour, and Mason Mount will be part of the squad, and maybe the mood will be lifted. But at the moment, Man United fans are well within their rights to be very, very frustrated.
Yep, I can say that, and I can see it all in the chat as well. I'm sorry, guys, we're not lifting your mood at all, anyway, shape or form today, but we're only reporting on what we see at the moment. I blame Ed Woodward. What about Dean Henderson? Yeah, it doesn't really get much. It doesn't get more exciting than that, to be honest. But Mason Mount, maybe one more player in. If I'll give you I'll give you 3 players. I'll give you a spine to choose from, Rob. Your choice of what bridges that gap to Manchester City, and then your realistic outcome for what you think will happen this summer. And guys, obviously you can play along if you want as well. Centre forward would have been Harry Kane. Who do you think it's going to be?
Holjund.
I think most people are with that one. That's a general consensus, to be honest, with that. Big one is midfield. Who would have been that key signing for United?
What if budget wasn't a problem?
Yeah, we talked about the start of the season, about Ten Hag coming into United. He expects United standards. That's what he talked about, winning every game. Yeah. United should be in for the best in the world.
I would have signed 2 of Mount, McAllister, Caicedo at Brighton, and Declan Rice.
It's horrible that you said all 4 of them, and we're not going to get anywhere near any of them.
I mean,
Mount.
I mean, that's the problem. The Rice thing. I think lots of United fans, maybe would be split on that. Whether they think he's a good addition or not.
I liked him.
I like Declan Rice. I think that you could even play him with Casemiro, maybe playing a bit further forward. I think he's just a high quality young central midfielder who can do almost everything. I think Ten Hag probably would like to be in that race as well, and United aren't ruling themselves out. I mean, again, Frankie de Jong is another one that United fans are probably sick of, but we were told at different stages last season that United would be back in for him, and even that's gone quiet. Jude Bellingham's another one. These are the players that United, a club the size of Man United, should be interested in. Not just interested in, should be getting over the line. And it's a problem if they're going to go to other clubs, because there is a situation, there's a scenario where Caicedo goes to Arsenal, Declan Rice goes to City, and not only are United not closer to City, they're actually starting next season even further away.
Oh God!
Which really, you can understand. I mean, I'm not. Look, it's all very well me and you sat here.
That's a reality.
Well, it's all very well me and you sat here saying these things, but the one person who's going to be massively frustrated by all of that is Ten Hag.
Yeah.
And then you do get into the realms of him thinking, well, why am I here? This is meant to be the biggest club in the world. I'm going to be judged on winning the Premier League title and winning the Champions League. I haven't got the tools to do that. Why am I here? And that's a really, really awkward conversation to have, because then what?
Yeah.
Well, then what? Where do you go? I'm asking that. I don't know the answer to that. Hopefully it don't come to that. But if we are still having this same conversation in Las Vegas, or in the week before the season starts, then that is a real conversation that probably needs to be had.
Yeah, that's it. Breaking news happens all the time. Apparently, the Telegraph are reporting Fulham are in for Fred, and United want 20 million for him. Are we starting? If we got 20 million for Fred, I would start to think that we're actually on an upward trend here and actually trying to do business the right way.
In fairness, it wouldn't take much. Again, I'm sure that fans are listening to that going, well, that's not really the breaking news that we had in mind, but that would help. Raising 50, 60 million from Fred, McTominay, Harry Maguire, Dean Henderson, Anthony Elanga.
And the wages off the books.
Yeah, wages off the books. Raise a really good chunk of money that could go back into the budget. Because it wouldn't take much to really affect that budget. And 60 million is Caicedo maybe. I mean, I'm not saying that they would go and spend
Caicedo add-ons. You could structure a deal.
Or it's Rice. It's Mount taken care of. So it's really, really important that they sell really, really well. Again, though, it's all very well me sat here and saying that. The fans want to see the proof of that, and then they're only going to see the proof of that if they get really sizable fees for the likes of Fred, McTominay, Maguire, just to boost that budget a little bit. Again, it wouldn't take much to kind of lift the mood around Old Trafford, and if it is Fred to Fulham for 20 million, that would be selling well.
Yeah.
Again, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, the story behind that and what is happening with that is that Fred is keen on the move, but Fulham don't really want to be paying 20 million for him. Here we go with negotiation table. Yes. Do you think Rashford will be at number 9 next season? Oh, Grace. Thanks for the question. I really don't want to answer that. I'm sure Rob doesn't want to either, because that means we haven't bought a striker. But Rashford belongs on the left wing. He clearly belongs on the left wing. We've seen it last night for England. Everyone in the world can see that he belongs on the wing. I just wanted to get your centre-back quickly. You talked about your midfield. Who would have bridged that gap, centre-back? And who do you think we will get? Will we get anyone now?
So I wouldn't have signed a centre-back.
Would you have kept Maguire, though?
No. So I think you can sell Maguire and be all right. I think the way that Luke Shaw played as a left-sided centre-half was adequate. We talked about
that the other day for England, didn't he, as well?
Was adequate cover. I think Malacia is very, very young and he's only going to get better. So you've got cover there at left-back. You've got Diogo as well, who could play at left-back. I've never been a massive Victor Lindelof fan, but hats off the end of last season, he was fantastic in some of them. The Brighton game in particular, he was absolutely fantastic. I think he's done enough to kind of earn the right to switch in and out with Raphael Varane. See, United have been linked obviously with centre halves this summer. United have kind of played that down a little bit, and I'm not surprised by that. I wouldn't kind of hold that against them, because I don't see that as necessarily an area where they need to improve. I think you've got a squad there where you've got 4 high quality centre halves. If you count Luke Shaw subbing in for Martinez when you need to, I think the budget needs to be spent elsewhere. I would have been surprised if United had gone straight out the gate and signed, maybe a Kim or someone like that, because I just don't see it as an area of the squad that needs improved straight away. I would spend the money in central midfield, centre forward, and a goalkeeper now. Goalkeeper,
that's it. I mean, if you bought, say your budget was 150 million, you've got enough there for quality players. If you sold a few players there, you could get them 3 players easily.
Yeah.
It looks like Championship Manager FIFA from the outside. It looks quite simple, but there's obviously complexities to it, like you said there. Negotiation, the way United work, the ownership and everything that's going on right now isn't helping anything at all. But yeah, guys, that pretty much finishes the show for us. We got Rob's ideal players. We know what he says, so you can all have a go at him. Do go follow Rob. What is your tag on Twitter, Rob, for people to follow you?
Rob Dawson, ESPN.
Rob Dawson, ESPN. Do go follow Rob Burnett. He will be with us on the tour as well, along with everyone else, hoping, like what we said, with some news and some exciting news for United. But yeah, stay tuned. Always breaking news like we just brought you then, and everything else that comes United. We'll be back tonight. Smart will be back from 8 o'clock, so do stay tuned for that. Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. Believe it or not, we will be bringing you something. It has to happen sooner or later, so just be alive to it, and we will see you later on tonight. Cheers for watching, everybody. Rob, thank you for coming on again, mate. Absolute pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.